All right.
Chris Herrington, thanks for joining me. This is Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and this is a live edition, another live edition of the Extra Podcast. Today, again, we're talking about coronavirus and maybe some other things with Chris, who was able to do an exclusive tour of Baptist Hospital. It was Baptist East, I believe, and you got to tour around with Dr. Threlkeld, who was on the podcast last week. And you got to see what they're doing and handling and how they're handling COVID patients in the ICU there. What were your, people can read this right on the site, obviously, but your impressions, basically a week later?
Yeah, it's funny. I went back and looked at the story, and it was from April 10th was the morning I went and took the tour, which is, 11 days ago or 10 days ago or whatever at this point. It feels like about 3 months ago. Like, I can't believe it was that recently. It seems like a lifetime ago. I think it may be much different now. I think just the way time is working, I don't know what you would see if you went there today, but on the morning I went, I spent 3 hours on a Friday morning. I followed Dr. Threlkeld on his morning rounds, essentially, both visiting patients and consulting with other doctors and nurses, and through the 2 COVID units they had, one sort of an ICU unit is redundant, but an ICU for the more serious cases, and then a step down unit, which was both sort of lower level cases and also people who were still sort of pending, right? I think the biggest takeaway was that it was a relatively calm experience, especially in the ICU, which was very quiet because, all the patients are sort of, shut off. But, we got so used to seeing these, reading and hearing these stories from New York and places where it's been hit the hardest about these sort of frantic hospital scenes. And that was not the scene that I experienced in Memphis, on that Friday morning at all. It was certainly more bustling on the step-down unit floor, which had more patients, and there was a little bit more in and out. You had people bringing meals to patients, and more of a typical, even that was more of a typical hospital experience when I've visited other people I know in the hospital. On the ICU unit, it was actually the quietest hospital experience I've ever had.
Yeah, and that is, by the way, your dog is making some noise. I think just shook its head. I think there was a kind of
yes, that's Juniper. I have 2 dogs, but one of them is out on a long walk right now. The little one is here at the house with me.
Okay, it's all fine. It's completely understandable. It's interesting when you think about that. I mean, I had that same reaction to, is that when I read your story, is it the calm before the storm? And we're week plus or almost week and a half since you did the tour. And the number of cases has obviously increased some, but it hasn't increased dramatically.
Right.
And even today or yesterday, my time is for everyone is a little off. You had a column about the governor, lifting as of May 1st, his stay-at-home order, and how that was a little bit, from your point of view, a little premature. Which is, I think, it's so interesting for you as a writer. I mean, that you're writing that and covering it, because there is this strange dynamic that if we do social distancing right, we'll never hit the kind of terrible situation that northern Italy hit or New York City hit. And then we'll all look around and go, well, why did we do, or many people will look around and go, why did we do?
No, it's good that that hospital wasn't overwhelmed. That's the whole point. Right. It's not that, we're waiting to be overwhelmed. They're preparing for, the surge that may come, but you're not wishing for it. You're not hoping for it. And I guess my thing today with Governor Lee's decision, I do think it's somewhat premature to me. I would have been more reassured if he'd waited a couple of weeks on what he did. But I think it's an easy thing to overreact to, probably, because it is so partial, it is so contingent. It does not apply to 40% of the population of the state. And it is, I think he means it to be, as I wrote about it today, I used sort of the analogy of red light, yellow light, green light. I think he means it to be a flashing yellow. My concern would be that some people in the state who are eager to get back to this normal, that it's not going to exist for a while, will see it as more of a green light, and that is a concern of mine. But I think however we go forward, we're going to be going forward in a very sort of gradual, contingent, sometimes fitful way that we have to navigate. They'll be different for different places. And I do think what he's doing is in the spirit of that. To me, it seems a little too early.
Yeah, and it has caused no small amount of confusion. I mean, you can see and hear, you look at social media, people are like, oh, I'm all right, we're back as of May 1st. And again, the lifting doesn't apply to Memphis. and Nashville and Chattanooga and Knoxville, a couple other cities, I believe. But it also is so, like you said, so contingent. And we had Mayor Strickland on behind the headlines last week, and he made very clear that they'd been talking to the governor. The governor was going to maybe do some things differently in rural Tennessee than in urban Tennessee. But I do think that, I mean, and maybe that's also a function of the daily, I mean, news sites like ours, like our headlines maybe and leads should have been a little bit different, because this lifting is a little bit, I hate to say symbolic, but it's closer to symbolic than actual.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm thankful that we have that confusion, because there's less confusion in Georgia, where it applies to the whole state, right? And it applies to Atlanta as much as, like, the small rural towns. And so I'll give the governor credit of acknowledging that something like this can't be one size fits all. I think I didn't write about this in the column I wrote today, but I've written about this subject in other areas before. In so many ways, Tennessee is an odd construct of a thing, right? It's just this long, narrow state where the reality in West Tennessee isn't much like the reality in East Tennessee. And the idea that public health things that would apply to a small town in East Tennessee that would apply to Memphis, and we should care more about that than what's happening in Little Rock or in Oxford or in DeSoto County. I mean, to me, in Tennessee in particular, I just think these decisions need to be as localized as they can possibly be. And I do appreciate that Governor Lee sort of gets that relative to the cities in the state in a way that not every, Republican governor in the Southeast does.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. You talk about the odd geographic grouping of Tennessee and other places. But I was talking to Mayor Strickland last week, and he was talking about how they're coordinating real closely with the suburban, mayors and with Mayor Harris and trying to kind of stay on the same page. And somehow DeSoto County came up, and I said, "Are you all coordinating with DeSoto County?" And he was, "Well, not so much, because they haven't been involved." And he was very polite about it, but it was clear they're just not engaging as much. They have an entirely different governor, entirely different set of potential rules about, a 10-minute drive from where I'm sitting and where you're sitting right now. It's very odd, actually. Let me go back to a column you wrote, I think, again, 2 weeks ago, which is, in Corona years, 2 months ago, that was titled, "There's Much We Don't Know, But Should Know About Coronavirus in Memphis." Do you feel like we know more than we did 2 weeks ago, but are we getting as much information as we need?
Oh, I think we're in the business where we always want more information, right? We always want as much as we can get. But I think the amount and quality and specificity of information we were getting changed dramatically in the days and week or so after I wrote that column. I think, they had taken a lot of heat, I think justifiably, for being a little behind the curve in terms of the level of information we were getting. I think it was mostly just slow gathering, not reluctance, not unwillingness to provide it. But yeah, I feel like the quality of our information has gotten, substantially better in the last week or two.
I had a pleasant argument with a healthcare professional, not somebody who's been on the show, but a healthcare professional, about how we've been too hard on, calling your column. Ronnie Ramos, our executive editor, wrote a column, "We Need Answers." Mark Pereskia, lots of folks within Daily Memphian, Jane Roberts, has been fantastic, and calling for, hey, what is the answer to how many tests are being done and how many ICU beds? And part of this healthcare person was saying, look, they didn't know, and you're being too hard on them, and they're working really hard, and they're trying really hard. And I said, I don't know that we ever meant that they weren't trying, but sometimes if the answer is we don't know, that's an okay answer. And what we weren't getting was, we were getting answers like, well, we don't have to release that. And that's just not fair. That's not just to the media, because it's not just about the media, but you can see from the traffic we have on our site and from the comments we get and the anecdotal comments I hear, they want information, and why they made that decision not to reveal things sooner was an odd one. But it does seem to me as well that we're getting a lot more. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, but we're getting more.
No, I agree.
Back to the story for a second, then we'll shift gears a little bit. But when you toured, were you nervous? Were you all suited up and geared up, or how
I was not fully PPE'd out for the entire experience. I wore a mask, obviously, for the entire time I was there. They give you a mask when you walk into the hospital, like in the lobby, right? But yeah, so I was wearing a mask, and not the same mask the whole time, but I was in a mask the whole time. I went into 2 patient rooms. only one of which I wrote about. The other I could have written about, but I didn't feel like it really fit the story or added to the story, and I just decided to leave it out. I didn't think it really worked. And the one I went into that I didn't write about was the ICU patient who had received ECMO treatment, the extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, the first patient in the Mid-South area to receive this treatment for COVID. And so when I went into that room, I mean, you may get this reference. I did this on Jeff Calkins' show. He had no idea what I was talking about, but I told a friend of mine in college, I look like a droog, but with a mask instead of a bowler hat. That's from A Clockwork Orange. And so I was wearing, you got that behind you somewhere?
Behind me somewhere, yes.
Right. And so like I was wearing white, like from head to toe. And then I had gloves and I had a mask and I think that's called I think they pronounce it a PAPR. It's PAPR, which is an acronym for something, but it's a sort of a respiration system that attaches to a mask and a shield that you wear. Gloves, booties, hat, and my size 13 feet were hard to get into like the booties, right? And so, getting me outfitted into that took like 3 nurses basically to help, and just as many people to get me out of it. And the getting out of it is the trickier part, because not just for me, but for even the doctors when they come out of those rooms. I mean, they're getting assistance to get out of the PPE, personal protective equipment, because it has to be a very exacting process of removal, because you don't want to contaminate anything in the process of the removal, most especially yourself, right?
Right.
And so, and for me, I'm just doing what I'm told the whole time. Like I'm not moving a muscle. Like I'm just taking orders, right? Input, output. I was not that nervous, honestly. I mean, we had discussed it on the front end. I'd had conversations. I talked to Dr. Threlkeld. I communicated with other people at Baptist on the front end about the whole parameter of what we were doing, like what I could see, what I could not see, information I could use, not use. And I talked to him about that, because I'm quarantining, is not the right word. I'm isolating here at home. I have a wife, I have 2 kids. And so one of my questions to him was, am I going to have to self-quarantine from my family for a period of time after I do this? And he did not think that was necessary. And so I basically put myself in the hands of medical professionals, and I trusted them, and they made me feel totally at ease with it. And, it's been 11 days at this point. And so if I were going to show any symptoms or have any problems, I would have had them by now. And so I think I'm pretty in the clear.
Getting out of the clothes kind of reminds me, it's like when you get back from the grocery store now, if you're like me, I mean, you sort of wipe down your stuff, and you have to really be so purposeful. And like, how do you get everything out of the bag, wipe down and into without recontaminating it?
I've been trying, I'm just going to throw names out there. We do this on the podcast, the Jennifer's podcast, so I assume you don't mind.
No,
when I've been grocery shopping, I've been mostly trying to keep it to, I try to go no more than once a week, every week and a half. I try to go to small places. So I do mostly Fresh Market. I've been going to Viet Ho, my neighborhood, Asian market. But I needed eggs, and I struck out twice at Fresh Market for eggs. So this weekend I went to Kroger to get eggs, and I went in. That was more stressful to me than 3 hours at the COVID unit. Seriously.
Oh, I find I haven't been to Kroger in, I think, 3 weeks, and I don't fault Kroger so much for this, maybe, but
just big grocery stores like that. Yeah.
Too much. I mean, it was really a little overwhelming. And just they're trying, and the people when they're working are working so hard. I mean, I just feel for them, but it was a little too much. And I've tried to kind of stay clear of some of that. Same with Home Depot type, situation,
right.
Where it's a little too frantic for me. Even if I have a mask, I find it to be a little bit too much. Let's do a quick break. We'll do a kind of live break here, actually. And say that the reminder that this podcast, even the live one, is brought to you by FedEx. Possibilities, what we deliver by delivering. As Chris mentioned, the Extra Podcast is one of many podcasts we do, Destination Delicious, that Jennifer does, along with Chris and others. In normal times, we have sports podcasts, but not so much right now. Bill Dries does a politics podcast. Behind the Headlines is a podcast. All of them are on the site. They're on iTunes. They're on Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. One thing, we talk about businesses that are open, and you mentioned this in the column today, and it's been heavy on my mind from the beginning of this for a variety of reasons, is the economic impact, particularly on small businesses. And when you look at the kind of protesters and all that stuff, And you joked about that, there were more media than protesters at the protest at City Hall or wherever it was here in Memphis recently. But I feel like, I don't even know how to make sense of it, but I do, without a doubt, feel the pain that people are feeling and the anxiety people are feeling to get reopened. You cover a lot of local small businesses. You wrote about bookstores this week, and you covered restaurants in various ways and food and all this very local stuff. And you and I probably have mutual friends and acquaintances who are just in really economically difficult situations right now. I don't know what the answer is to that.
Well, we're both in a rooms with lots of books behind us. Yours look a bit more neat, a little bit neater than mine. I didn't properly prep to try to impress. But you mentioned the column I wrote earlier this week, where I talked to the proprietors or people from the four, I would say, most prominent, locally owned independent book and record stores in town. And three of those, Novel, Burke's Books, and Garner Records, had submitted applications for this payroll protection program, forgivable loan program through the Small Business Administration. And on the day that I talked to two of those people from Burke's and Garner, in between those two phone calls is when the news broke that all the money was gone. And all those three businesses all had loans in. They had not gotten money out of it yet. They were hopeful, and then you find out the money's gone. And so hopefully, this 250 million that was, or billion, I think, that was approved today. A little bit before we start talking, hopefully those businesses will get some of that. But to me, that dovetails with this issue of when we come back or how we phase ourselves back, the economy back in. Is I think there's more pressure and more impatience around it because both people and small businesses have yet to get the amount of assistance that they need. And the point of that assistance, as I wrote today, was not to stimulate the economy. It was trying to keep it afloat. It was basically a purchase. It was trying to buy time, to purchase the social distancing pause that we needed for medical reasons. And I think the slowness with which that federal assistance has gotten to individuals and small businesses that need it is one of the reasons there's more antsiness about trying to restart the economy.
Yeah, I will say on a personal, or not personal, but professional, I've been involved in 3 PPP loans in the last 2-week period through Daily Memphian has applied, and we have not been funded, but we've been told we made it in the cutoff. And then my old gig that I continue to be involved with, the old Daily News and our community papers over there, we did 2 loans over there for the 2 companies. I think I took a year and a half off my life. It was one of the most stressful processes to be involved in. It was not the bank's fault. It was, and I don't know whose fault it was, but there was a lack of clarity from the SBA, a lack of clear process. I have numerous other friends, small business owners or people who run businesses, who kind of were all texting each other. Do you have the application? Is the application final? How's your bank doing? How's your bank not doing? We, I think, wrote about the story of a restaurant in town that got very frustrated with its big national bank and has switched to using a more local bank. And I think you'll see a lot of that because anecdotally, I've heard the smaller the bank, the better your response was, because people tend to have a closer.
Well, one of the businesses I talked to was not able to submit an application because the bank that they used was, with some reason, was not part of the program. And then another of the people I talked to, and I think I used these quotes in the story, said the whole process had been frustrating, not just for him, but when he talked to people at his bank, when he talked to accountants, everybody he talked to along the lines was pulling their hair out as well. Yeah. Which is not surprising when you're trying to put together. I think we had another story, and maybe I wrote it, maybe someone else wrote it, I don't know. We had another story where we quoted, this is the way it is now.
I totally understand that.
I think we had another story, I think it was Beverly Robertson from the Chamber, we quoted as saying, the Small Business Administration was trying to build the plane in the air with this. And so, it's understandable that it would that it would get gummed up a little bit, but the impacts are the impacts regardless.
Another thing you wrote, though, I guess, and again, I forgot which column it was, but you wrote, the lifting of the order by the governor or any of these things. I've been reminding people, and you said it more articulately than I will, many of the restaurants were starting to close before they were ordered to close. People stopped going. I remember the last restaurant I went to, and it felt uncomfortable. It was still open, but it was too close. It felt like we shouldn't be there. And we walked out and had a nice meal and everything, but said, I don't think we're doing that anymore. And then they cascaded close. So then the question becomes, when do they reopen? Not because of government intervention and regulation, but because when do people get comfortable going into a restaurant or a bookstore or so on?
No, I feel like we talk about all these issues in two binary way, opening the economy, closing the economy, turning it on, turning it off. And it's not a switch. It's going to be this process. And that process is not only involve the decisions of presidents and governors and mayors and health professionals. It involves the decisions of individual business owners, individual people who have to make individual decisions about, what they're going to do with their lives, right? Yeah. And so, Jennifer Biggs had a story this week, talking a couple stories, but one of them, she talked to some local restaurant owners who said, like, we don't want to open right now because, we're not comfortable with having people in the restaurant. We don't think people are going to come to the restaurant. If you live if your restaurant is downtown, like the businesses don't have the employees there, the events are not happening downtown. So that customer base is not there. And it's not a switch we can just flip and everything turns on. It's going to be, like I sort of wrote, it's not a green light. It's going to be a flashing yellow. We're going to have to navigate. And we're going to be navigating that flashing yellow light in some way for like maybe the next year and a half in different ways. And that's why, it has to be, to me, a very targeted, gradual, sort of strategic kind of process we're going to go through.
That gets to, you and I are both big music fans, and I'm a big Grizzlies fan. You obviously are covered the Grizzlies for quite a while now. Is it fair to call you a fan of the Grizzlies? Does that ruin your?
I would say I'm a fan of professional basketball, and I'm a fan of the city of Memphis. And so I have a rooting interest in the success of professional basketball in the city of Memphis.
Got it. When will you be comfortable going to a Grizzlies game or a concert?
I think as a fan, in the media, it's a little, although we're pretty packed in too. I do not anticipate there will be NBA games with fans, certainly not to complete this season or these playoffs. And I would be surprised if we begin normal schedule in the fall that way. I don't think that if there was a game tonight, if I were going to go cover a game, I would need to have a different physical setup than what is the normal physical setup. And as a fan, I would not be comfortable going.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, because it's sort of, you look around, I'm 50-ish and I've got,
what I wonder about, and I haven't asked anyone with the Grizzlies about this, but at some point with those kind of large gatherings, at some point when we do bring them back, or they give away like game night promotions, like here's your scarf. Are we going to give away masks so everyone has a mask? I'm serious. Are we going to do temperature checks? We're going to do temperature checks as people come in. Those are the kind of things I would hope these kind of businesses, public-facing businesses that deal with large groups of people are thinking about right now.
Well, and I also wonder too, there's been whispers of this nationally, or not whispers, but just some writing about it. There's going to be liability issues. So if a public venue, whatever a public space, is letting people in, and someone goes in and gets corona, is out of work, God forbid, dies, that's a potential lawsuit in the making. And so some of these companies are not going to be real anxious to open, even if people are at the front door. It's a fascinating dynamic. So you don't think, back to Grizzlies just for a second, you don't think they'll finish the season? They'll just call it?
Oh, I don't think there will be any more regular season basketball. I think they will make every effort possible to find a way to have some kind of playoff to say, so you don't have a year without an NBA champion. I think there will be every effort made to do that. And I think they will wait as long as possible before pulling the plug on doing that. And so even if that means delaying the start to the next season, and so, I do think that they will try to find a way, the NBA, to put a bow on the season. The Grizzlies, based on the standings, would be a playoff team if everything started today, but they would be the last team in. And it wouldn't surprise me if they just decided we can't have that many teams. If they made a cutoff somewhere higher than that, but that's just my speculation.
You take like the top 6 or top 4 or 5.
Yeah, right. Something like that.
Of like 3 or 4 games, 5 games, not 7 or something.
Yeah, I don't think you could do the normal playoff structure as it currently existed. Right.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, a couple other things you've been writing. You were you've been on the Destination Delicious podcast, a little cross promotion there. You've also done these Essential Library, Memphis Library stories. Talk about those real quick. Yeah,
this is a bit of a passion project. This is actually something when I left years ago, Ancient History, when I left the Memphis Flyer to go to the Commercial Appeal to be the A&E editor there, I formulated a content plan, and it was on my content plan, but it was sort of like, deeper on the list. It was after we do A, B, C, D, and E, this is the thing I think would be cool to do. And, we got there and like the company sold every 3 months and the new website, the change was so constant that we didn't get very.
I hadn't heard any of those stories. I didn't know.
Right. And so it had been an idea that had been in my back pocket for a long time. And when the stay-at-home thing happened, I sort of thought, I wasn't going to have basketball to write about as much. And I was going to segue into doing more in newspaper business, we call it metro columns, but more general, like, life in the coronavirus kind of stories. But I thought it might be a good thing, because people are staying at home and they're reading, they're watching movies or listening to music, a good thing to do. But I just like the idea because, I think it's something, a lot of what we do hopefully has value down the road, but there's the whole idea of like yesterday's fish wrap, right? With newspapers, that you're covering today's stories, then you move on to the next thing. And I've always liked the idea of sort of evergreen content, things that are still relevant. Like the Grizzlies glossary is a thing I do that I think you could look at in 5 years and it's still like a thing. Yeah. And I think this idea of sort of the idea of Essential Memphis Library, for people who haven't seen it, is if you had a home library, like the ones we're sitting in sort of, and you wanted to pack it with anything relevant to your city that's worth being there, like what books would be on the shelf, what albums or songs would be on the shelf, what movies would be in, what actual things could you collect that would sort of tell the story of your city. And so the idea is I'm going to sort of put together that library one item at a time, as long as it seems relevant. I mean, I think it could go on for years, literally at 1 or 2 a week. And to me, I think as you add to it, it becomes more interesting, hopefully, and it's a destination that people can go to and just sort of, browse around. And I'm enjoying it, so I'll hope it works.
Yeah, and again, it's the Essential Memphis Library. People go on the site and search for Chris Herrington or search for that. That is, though, all the time we have today. Other than someone on YouTube asked what breed dog you have at your foot there.
So the dog my wife got back, my wife and kids got back with the other dog, and they let the little dog out of the room. So I'm by myself in the room right now, which creates a danger that the dogs will see some other dog getting to walk in the neighborhood and they'll start barking. But we have 2 dogs. They're both mutts. The older, bigger one, Louise, is some kind of hound. And the younger, smaller one is maybe some kind of terrier. She's a little white, like rodent looking thing. But they were both rescue dogs, so we don't know exactly what they are.
Okay, well, that's good. That's great. Okay, that is unfortunately all the time we have this week. A reminder that this podcast is brought to you by FedEx. Possibilities, what we deliver by delivering. And again, be sure to check out the other podcasts we do. They're on the site. They're on wherever you get your podcasts. If you missed the beginning of this, it'll be on the site as a video and also go into the podcast feed sometime later today or tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us, and we will try to do another one of these very soon. Thank you.